Some lessons don't come from books. They come from bruises. They come from life.
There is no substitute for experience, period.
Some of the biggest successes were a byproduct of failure.
If you want to learn, build, and grow,
Why not learn from somebody who's already paid the price for success?
the wisdom is in the gray.
This is The Greybeard Show.
Greybeard Show. Learn,
Build.
grow.
And welcome to the show. You're listening to The Greybeard Show. My name is Shawn Davis, but in case you didn't know, in case you didn't hear, just in case it wasn't quite clear, I go by Greybeard, and you're along with me, as today I'm doing a very special series, a very special edition to The Greybeard Show. It's The Greybeard Show Insured Money Edition. For those of you that are not aware, I spent 22 years as a fiduciary financial advisor, but in the great state of Texas, I'm licensed in the area of insurance, and today's show is going to be all about retirement. How do you get there? More importantly, how do you stay there? What are the important considerations you need to be thinking about today? So you're going to want to strap yourself in on this one, because I believe my purpose on this planet is to uplift, inspire, and encourage people into meaningful and lasting positive life change. And that certainly speaks to finances as well. So let me tell you exactly what you're about to get for the next hour, because I think it's a little different than what you're used to. I'm not going to tell you what the market's going to do next week. Nobody knows that. And anybody who tells you they do is selling you something you don't need. What I am going to do today is make a case. An actual case, like you'd hear in a courtroom, except the verdict is about your retirement instead of somebody's guilt or innocence. And today's case is this: insured money. The kind of products I've spent 30 years learning, the kind built around guarantees instead of guesses, solves problems that your investments, no matter how good they are, cannot solve. Not won't, cannot. Now, before you decide whether you believe me, I want you to know who's making this case. I've been in financial services for 30 years. I built a practice from scratch, grew it, and eventually sold it. Along the way, I made plenty of mistakes, some of them big ones. In 2009, for example, I went bankrupt. Had my house foreclosed on. Not a fun year for a financial advisor, I'll tell you that. A few years later, I paid off almost $400,000 of IRS debt, exactly on my birthday in January of 2013. I tell you that not for sympathy and not because it's some sad story I'm finishing for attention. I tell you that because I want you to know something about the person making the case to you today. I have been on the floor financially. I know what it costs to climb back up. And when I tell you something works or it doesn't work, it's not theory to me, it's lived experience. So let's get into it. Point one of this case, and honestly, I think this might be the most important point of the entire show, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's something almost nobody says out loud, but the second you hear it, it's obvious. Everything you were taught for the first 40 years of your financial life was about building the pile. Almost nothing you were taught was about taking it apart. Now think about it. 401k contributions, employer matches, time in the market beats timing the market, dollar cost averaging. Every single piece of financial wisdom aimed at working adults is built around one goal: to make the number bigger. And for 40 years, that is the right goal. That's the right tool for the job. And I'm not knocking it, but when you retire, and the goal doesn't just shift a little, it flips completely. When you retire, now you're not adding to the pile every month. You're taking from it. And the tools that were perfect for building the pile were never designed to answer the question you're asking now. How do I take money out of this, out of my retirement plans? How do I do it safely? How do I do it proactively every single month for an unknown number of years without running out of money? The number one fear of retirees is running out of money before they run out of days. So here's the part I think people really need to hear. And I want to say this carefully because it's not a knock on anybody. It's just how the industry was built. Most financial advisors are, by training, by background, and frankly, how they get paid, growth specialists. They are accumulation experts. That's what they're trained to do, and that's what they're good at, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a real valuable skill, but growing money and distributing money are two completely different disciplines, almost two completely different professions, if we're honest. And very few advisors are trained, equipped, or even incentivized to think like what I'd call an income architect, someone whose entire job is to look at a pile of money and design how it comes apart, how it generates income for you for the rest of your life in the right order and the right amounts from the right places from the rest of someone's life. That's a fundamentally different skill than pick good investments and let them grow. And most people reach retirement having spent 40 years working with someone who's excellent at the first skill and has never once been asked to demonstrate the second one. So here's a picture that I think captures this better than anything else. Think about the difference between a contractor who builds a building and a structural engineer whose entire job is figuring out how to take that building apart safely, in the right sequence, without anything coming down before it's supposed to. Both are skilled professionals. Both work on the same structure, but you would never hire a demolition expert to pour the foundation, and you'd never hire the foundation crew to handle the teardown. Different jobs, same building. Most people's retirement money has spent 40 years with the construction crews. Almost nobody has ever brought in the demolition engineer, the person whose entire experience is to take your portfolio and distribute it to you safely, piece by piece, over your life to make sure that you have abundant income without the ups and downs of what's going on in the market. The skills that build a fortune and the skills that make a fortune last are not the same skills. And most people have only ever met someone who specializes in the first one. So how does insured money actually address this? This is where it plays a fundamentally different role than a typical investment account. Certain contracts are built around what's called an income rider, essentially a built-in income architecture that does the demolition engineering for you to distribute your portfolio substantially and equally safely over your lifetime, even guaranteeing income for your lifetime by design. Here's the concept in really plain English, simple English. A separate value inside an insurance contract, sometimes called an income base, is tracked specifically for the purpose of generating lifetime income for you, and it can grow on its own schedule. For example, we have some carriers where the income base, every year you wait, every year you don't take it, grows by approximately 9%, independent of how your actual account balance performs day to day. When you're ready to turn on income, that value is what determines your monthly amount. And once it's turned on, it's contractually guaranteed to continue for life, no matter what happens to the underlying account from that point forward. In other words, how do I take this apart safely question isn't left up to you, your spreadsheet or your withdrawal percentage you're hoping holds up. It's built into the structure of the contract itself, calculated and guaranteed in advance by the only companies that guarantee anything in this world, insurance companies. That's the income architect's job, done by the product automatically. Now, point two of the case. And this one's about something we all have been told our whole lives, but I don't think anyone's ever really stopped to examine it honestly. You've heard the market averages 8 to 10% a year over time. And here's the thing, that's true, but I want to be really, really careful here because this is the point where people sometimes hear something I'm not saying. I am not saying the market is bad. And I'm not saying you made a mistake by investing in it. The stock market has been one of the greatest wealth building machines in human history. And for money that has time on its side, it remains exactly that. I spent decades helping people build wealth through it. I'm not walking any of that back. But here's what's also true. And it's not a criticism. It's just a fact about the market. The market guarantees exactly nothing. Retirement is about guarantees. It's about peace of mind. The more certainty you can give your retirement, the better your retirement experience is going to be. The stock market guarantees exactly nothing. Zero. Not your principal, not your income, not the timing of when you retire, not how long your money needs to last. The market has never signed a contract with anybody. It can't. It's just the aggregate result of millions of people buying and selling every single day for their own reasons, with absolutely zero awareness that you exist. It does not guarantee your principal. The money you put in can be worth less than you put in at any time for any duration, including the exact day you go to withdraw it. It does not guarantee income. What you can safely take out depends completely on what the market happens to be doing the week you need the money or the year you need the money. It does not guarantee timing. It has no idea when you're retiring, no idea about your health, your spouse's health, none of it. And it does not guarantee longevity protection. It has no mechanism, none, for knowing how long your money needs to last. And it doesn't adjust if you live longer than anybody expected. Now, none of that is a flaw in the market, any more than it's a flaw in a hammer that it can't tell you whether the roof is going to leak. That's not what the hammer's for. The market's job is growth. And it does that job better than almost anything else ever invented over long stretches of time. But growth and guarantee are two completely different jobs done by two completely different tools. And a huge amount of confusion in retirement planning comes from expecting one tool to do the other tool's job. Here's the part that matters most. And I want you to really sit with this. The market does not care how old you are. It doesn't know you're 70 instead of 35. It doesn't slow down or wait for a better time because you happen to be retiring this year. If a major downturn lands the same year you retire, pure coincidence, it could happen to anyone. That's your problem, not the market's. The market isn't being unfair to you. It's simply being exactly what it has always been. The only question that matters is whether your plan accounts for that in advance or just quietly assumes it won't happen to you the way most plans do. So how does insured money address this? How does what I do help? Certain insured products are built around what's called an annual reset with a 0% floor. Here's the concept. Take example, fixed indexed annuity. Each year, your account has the opportunity to grow based on the performance of an index. But if that index, for example, S&P 500, but if that index is down for the year, your account simply does not grow. Not goes down a little less. It doesn't go down. The floor is zero. In fact, some people say zero is your hero in these accounts. For example, if the market went down 20%, would you rather ride it down 20% or would you rather just wave at everyone going down and just stop at zero? You don't get any interest, but you didn't go down in the account value. And here's the part I find most surprising. At the end of each year, whatever value you're at, including any growth, becomes the new starting point. It's reset higher. It can never reset back down due to market performance. So think about stepping upstairs. Maybe the stairs are 2 inches, maybe they're 10 inches, maybe they're 20 inches, maybe it's a long landing before you go to stairs. That's how these products work. They only go up. They never go down. And that, in retirement, is something that might be welcome. This is the direct answer to the market promises nothing. This structure promises something very specific. Your account value, due to market performance alone, cannot go backward. That's not the market making you a promise. Markets can't do that. That's a contract from an insurance company making you a promise. That's insured money. And contracts can guarantee things markets never can. So when we come back, point 3 of the case, we're going to talk about a number you've heard 100 times, average returns, and why that number can be one of the most misleading numbers in all of retirement planning. I'm going to show you 2 retirees with the exact same average return who can end up with completely different retirements, and the only difference is timing. Right now, though, for those of you out in Radio Land that are listening, if you'd like to get more information on what insured money is. That's what I do now. After 30 years of being in financial services, the only way I work with clients, the only work I do in financial services is insured and guaranteed. It's backed by insurance companies. If you'd like to learn more, the case for insured money, it solves problems investments cannot solve. You can gain a copy of this simply by taking out your smartphone right now. Go to your texting app. We initially communicate with our audience via texting. If you go to your texting app, key in this number. Key it in like it's a cell phone number, 84503. I know it's only 5 digits, but act like it's a 10-digit number. Key that in. And what I want you to text is SAFE, S-A-F-E. Text SAFE to 84503. Everybody that does, I'll ask you 2 simple questions. I'll send you the link for the resource that I promised. But more importantly than that, if you have questions about your own individual situation, if you're curious whether or not you're set up safely with retirement, if you've got insured money and the guarantees it provides for retirees such as yourself, you can sit down with me personally. All of that begins simply by texting SAFE to 84503. All right, before the break, we covered the first 2 points of the case. That retirement is a distribution problem, not an accumulation problem, and that the market, for all of its strengths, guarantees you absolutely nothing. If you're just tuning in, don't worry. Every point in this case stands on its own, and I'll bring you up to speed as we go. But now let's get into point number 3, and I think this might be the single most underexplained concept in all of personal finance. You've heard the number. The market averages 7 to 10% a year over time. True. And also one of the most misleading numbers in retirement planning because of one factor that has nothing to do with the market itself and everything to do with timing. Here's why. While you're working, while you're still adding money to your accounts every month, the order your returns happen in barely matters. A bad year early in your career is almost a gift. You're buying more while things are cheap and you've got decades for it to recover. But the moment you flip from adding money to your accounts to withdrawing money, everything about that math changes completely. Let me give you a picture. Picture 2 retirees. Both retire with the exact same amount of money. Both withdraw the same amount every year to live on. And here's the key part. Both experience the exact same set of annual returns over a 25-year retirement. The exact same average returns, just in a different order. Retiree 1 gets strong returns in the early years of the retirement, weaker returns later. Their account grows in those first critical years, so by the time a downturn eventually shows up, there's plenty of cushion, money-wise, to absorb it. Retiree 2 gets the same returns, just reversed. Weak years first, strong market years later. Their account takes a hit right out of the gate. In the same years, they're also withdrawing income to live on. Mathematically, both retirees have the exact same average return. On a spreadsheet projected forward, they look identical. The spreadsheet just multiplies and averages, and the average is the same number either way between person A and person B. But financially, in real life, they can have completely different retirements because retiree 2 was forced to sell investments at depressed prices early on just to generate the income that they needed that month. Those losses locked in early became very difficult, sometimes impossible to recover from because there's less money left to participate when the good years eventually show up. Retiree 1 never had to do that. Their portfolio had time to do what portfolios do: recover, compound, and grow. So what I'm saying here, this isn't theory, and it isn't some rare edge case. This is one of the single greatest risks facing anyone entering retirement. And almost nobody has ever had it explained to them in plain language because it doesn't fit on a one-page brochure or in a 30-second commercial. The order of your returns, whatever you get in the market, the order, good years, bad years, the order that you experience those returns matters as much as the average. Sometimes it can matter more. Here's a way to picture it that might make it stick. Imagine 2 farmers, each planting the exact same crop in the exact same soil. And over 10 years, they get the exact same total rainfall, down to the inch. Sounds like they should end up in the same place, right? But what if farmer 1 gets all his rain spread out nicely across the growing seasons, while farmer 2 gets almost none of it in the years 1 and 2, right when his seedlings are most vulnerable, and then gets it all dumped on him in years 8, 9, and 10, after most of his crop already failed? Same total rainfall, same average, completely different harvests. That's something called sequence risk. It's not about how much rain falls, it's about when it falls relative to what you need it for. So here's the key insight, and it's the bridge to everything else we're talking about today. Guaranteed income. If you can have guaranteed retirement income, guaranteed income reduces the need to sell investments during exactly the years when selling does the most damage. If your basic income needs are covered by something that doesn't care what the market did this month, something contractually obligated to show up regardless, your investment portfolio is never forced into a fire sale just because a withdrawal happens to be due on the calendar because you want to get paid in retirement. It gets to wait out the storm the way it's supposed to, the way it was designed to. So how does insured money actually address this? Remember the income-based concept I talked about in the first segment. Here's where it directly solves the sequence risk problem. Once lifetime income is turned on, your monthly payment is calculated from that protected income base, not from your actual account value on any given day. That means if the market has a brutal first 2 years of your retirement, exactly the retire to scenario I just talked about, your income payment doesn't change. It's not pulling from a shrinking account at depressed prices. It's coming from a value that was already locked in on a schedule that was already guaranteed, regardless of what the index did that quarter. This is the mathematical, mechanical answer to sequence risk. It removes the connection between what the market did this week and what shows up in your account this month. Retiree 1 and retiree 2, if both had this structure in place, would have had the same retirement experience, not because the market treated them the same, because the income mechanism didn't care what the market did either time. All right, here's point 4. And I'll be honest with you, this might be my favorite point of the whole case because it's the one that hardest to argue with, and once you actually look at it. Here's something the financial industry doesn't love to advertise, but the data on it is overwhelming. Study after study shows that the average investor earns significantly less than the very investments they own. Not because the investments performed badly, the funds and indexes often did exactly what they were supposed to do. The gap exists because of what the investor did while holding them. Why does this happen? 2 words, really: fear and euphoria. And they show up at exactly the wrong moments every single time, like clockwork. People sell, individuals, retirees sell when markets crash, often right near the bottom, locking in losses that would have fully recovered if they'd simply done nothing. People pile in when markets are euphoric, often right near the top, buying high because everyone around them seemed to be making easy money. And the fear of missing out gets louder than the rational thoughts. People abandon carefully built, professionally designed plans the moment their emotions spike. And emotions spike at exactly the moments when patience is hardest to find and decisions matter most. It reminds me of the Muhammad Ali quote, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." You can have the best retirement ever, but man, that first year, second year, the critical 5-year window of when you start retirement, you have any knockout punches by the market in that period of time, it's going to completely ruin your plan. People sell when markets crash. And I've seen this up close more times than I can count over 30 years. And I've sat with people who had genuinely excellent portfolios, well diversified, professionally managed, exactly what a textbook would recommend, and watched them make a panicked decision during a downturn that undid years of careful planning on a single phone call. Not because the plan was wrong, because living inside that plan during a real crash with real money felt completely different than it looked on paper months or years earlier. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A retirement strategy that looks perfect on a spreadsheet but causes you to panic in real life is not actually a good strategy for you. Even if the spreadsheet says it is, and even if every advisor in town would sign off on it, the spreadsheet doesn't have to live through a 30% drop while wondering if it can still afford groceries next month or whether it cancel a trip the grandkids have been looking forward to for a year. You do. The spreadsheet has no nervous system. You do. The best portfolio in the world is worthless if you can't emotionally hold on to it when it matters most. This is where guaranteed income does something that doesn't show up on any performance chart, any prospectus, or any rate of return comparison. It provides you emotional stability. When you know your basic needs are covered no matter what the market does today, this week, or this quarter, a market crash stops being a 5-alarm emergency about your survival. It becomes news, something happening out there in the world, not something happening directly to your ability to keep living the lifestyle you wanted to live in retirement. And when you're not in panic mode, you make better decisions. Or just as often, you make no decision at all, which is usually exactly the right one. So how does insured money, how does what I do, how does this help? How does insured money address this? Honestly, it's not a separate mechanism. It's the same mechanisms we've already talked about, but viewed through a different lens. Notice something about everything we've covered so far. The 0% floor. 0 is your hero. The protected income base, a number that grows regardless of what your account does. And some products we have, some carriers are offering rates of growth yearly as much as 9%, growing your income amount 9% a year. The lifetime guarantee. None of these require you to do anything in that moment. There's no should I sell now decisions. They don't work that way. There's no checking the account before deciding whether you can afford this month's bills. The guarantee already made the decision years in advance when you signed the contract. That's the behavioral fix, and it's arguably the most underrated one of all. The single biggest threat to most portfolios isn't a bad investment. It's a panic decision made by a scared person during a bad week. A structure that removes the need for that decision in the first place doesn't just protect the money, it protects the person from themselves on the one day it mattered most. I want to say something here that I think is important. This isn't about not trusting yourself or thinking less of anyone who's ever made a panic decision with money. I've made plenty of mistakes myself. I told you about a couple of big ones already in this hour, right? You're talking to a guy that went bankrupt in 2009, lost his house in 2009. I had the IRS chasing me for years. Man, I've been through some fire. I've lost everything, and I've rebuilt from there. I know what financial stress feels like, and you do not want it in retirement. This is about being honest about what it takes to be a human being with real money on the line during a real crisis. Nobody plans to panic. It just happens in the moment to good people, smart people, disciplined people. The only real defense against a moment like that is making sure the decision was already made calmly in advance on a good day so there's nothing left to decide when the bad day comes. When we come back, points 5 and 6. We're going to talk about why nobody knows the one number that matters most for your retirement plan, which is how long you're going to live, and why that's actually something to look forward to, not something your plan secretly can't handle. And then we're going to do some math together, real numbers that I think might change how you look at your entire financial picture. But before I do, here's what I'll say. If you'd like to learn more about what I'm talking about today, if you'd like to learn more about insured money, then I've got something right here for you. Take out your smartphone, go to your texting app, key in the following number, 84503. 84503. Key that in like it's a cell number for me, like you just met me and I'm telling you about something. You go, hey, I want to call you. I want to talk to you about it. How's that work again? So here's what you do. You text SAFE. Because after 30 years in financial services, I no longer want to deal with anything that I can't tell you is safe. It's the case for insured money. It's a PDF, about 14 pages. It solves problems investments cannot solve. You can get your copy of it. I'll send it directly to you. You'll have a link that you can download it in, okay? All you got to do is text SAFE, S-A-F-E, to 84503. And if you'd like to talk with me more, we'll give you an opportunity. If you'd like to talk with me about your own individual retirement plan situation. But if you do, know this about me, know this about the conversation. I'm going to talk to you about things that I can put my name behind, things that I'm not going to have to apologize to you for owning, things that solve problems that nothing else can. Now, not everybody focuses on things like these. I like the safe. I like the guaranteed. I like to know that you're going to have income that you cannot outlive. That's where I've become specialized. I don't want to deal with stocks, bonds. I used to do that. I spent 22 years in that industry. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to move on to something better, something more aligned with who you've become. And that's what I've done. So text SAFE to 84503 if you'd like to have a conversation with me about your retirement strategy and its effectiveness against what we've talked about today. All right, jumping back in. So far in this case, we've covered the distribution problem versus the accumulation problem, what the markets can and can't promise you, the hidden danger inside average returns, and the very real risk that the biggest threat to your portfolio might be the person looking back at you in the mirror. Now let's get on to point 5. And I think this one might be the most personal of all, because it's about something every single person listening shares, whether they've thought about it this way or not. Here's the challenge. Retirement planning has one problem that almost no other kind of planning has. You have to build a plan that works without knowing how long it needs to work for. And I think about this a lot, actually, in terms of my own family. I've been married to Jen, my high school sweetheart, for over 32 years now. And we've got 4 sons. And when I think about retirement planning for the 2 of us, the honest truth is I have no idea if I'm planning for 20 more years or 40 more years, and nobody does. And yet every spreadsheet, every projection, every here's what your money looks like at age 90 chart has to pick a number. It has to assume something. And whatever it assumes, there's a real chance it's wrong in one direction or other. Let me put this in terms that might land differently. Imagine someone hands you an engineering problem and says, build something that needs to function for somewhere between 15 and 40 years. We won't tell you which, and we won't tell you until it's too late to change anything. Any engineer would tell you that is an extraordinarily hard problem to solve well. You'd either have to massively overbuild, spending way more than necessary on the short end just in case, or risk catastrophic failure on the long end if you guess too low. That's not a hypothetical, friends. That is the actual problem every single retiree is solving, whether they realize it consciously or not. Plan for 20 years and live 35, and the math doesn't just get a little off. It can fail completely, and it fails at the exact moment in life when you have the least ability to do anything about it. There's no going back to work in any meaningful way at 88. There's no, I'll just cut back next year, when next year is the shortfall. Here's where insurance does something an individual portfolio simply cannot do. No matter how well managed it is, no matter how skilled the advisor sitting across from you is, it pools that unknown across thousands of people. Some folks in that pool will live to 75. Some will live to 100. The insurance company doesn't need to know which one will you be, because across thousands of lives, the unknowns average out in a way they mathematically never can for one single person managing their own money. That's not a sales technique. That's actuarial science, and it's been the foundation of the insurance industry for centuries. Think about what this actually means for you personally. If you're managing your own portfolio and trying to make it last, you essentially have to plan as if you might live to 100 just in case, which often means underspending for decades to be safe, living more frugally in your 70s and 80s than you actually needed to, simply because you couldn't know in advance whether you'd need that cushion at 95. An insurance company pooling risk across a massive group of people can offer you a guarantee for life without you having to personally carry the weight of that unknown and without you having to underlive your own retirement just to protect against a scenario that might never happen. That's not a sales pitch. That's just how risk pooling works. And it's something a portfolio of stocks and bonds by itself, no matter how well built, structurally cannot replicate, because a portfolio is one person's money facing one person's unknown lifespan with no pool to share that unknown across. So how does what I do, how does insured money address this? This is the lifetime income rider in its purest form. It converts a portion of your savings into a personal pension, income that continues for as long as you live, whether that's 15 years or 45. The insurance company is contractually on the hook for that promise for as long as you're alive, because they pooled that exact promise across thousands of other people, some of whom will live shorter lives and some longer. From where you sit, that experience is simple. A check shows up every month for life. The way a pension used to work for our parents' generation. You never have to ask, is this the year I need to cut back, just in case I live to 100? The just in case was already solved on day one by the structure of the contract, not by you, year after year, guessing. Whew. I didn't realize how passionate I can get about finance. I guess that's 22 years of experience. All right, here's point 6. And I want you to lock in because we're going to do some real math together. And I think by the time we're done, you're going to look at your own numbers a little differently. Let me give you 2 people. Person 1 has a $2 million portfolio. No pension, no guaranteed income beyond Social Security. Just a portfolio they're managing on their own, hoping it lasts. Person 2 has a $1 million portfolio, literally half as much, but has Social Security, a pension, and additional guaranteed income layered on top of that. On paper, person 1 is twice as wealthy. If you're only looked at the account statements, you'd assume person 1 is in the better position. No contest, into discussion. But here's the question that actually matters, and it's the same question that's been underneath this entire case, this entire discussion, this whole hour from the very beginning. Which one of these people feels more secure day to day, year after year in retirement? In my experience, and I want to stress, this is not a hypothetical. This is a pattern I have watched play out over and over across 30 years of being in the financial services business. It's very often person 2, the one with half the net worth. Why? Why? Greybeard, why? Because retirement isn't about account values. It's about cash flow. Retirees don't spend net worth. They spend income. Person 2 has more of the thing that's actually being spent every single month, even with less of the thing that gets measured on a statement once a quarter. I've sat across the table from both of these people more times than I can count. Person 1 often comes in looking great on paper and acting nervous in person, checking their phone for the market, asking a lot of what if questions, treating every withdrawal like it's a decision that could blow up the whole plan. Person 2 tends to come in relaxed. They already know what's showing up next month. The conversation isn't, can I afford this? It's, what do I want to do with this? That's the difference cash flow makes. And it has nothing to do with which one of them is smarter with money. It has everything to do with which one of them built a plan around the right question. Here's where this becomes really powerful. And I want to walk through it slowly, because this is the kind of math that once you see it, changes how you look at everything else. Let's say a retiree needs $8,000 a month to live the life they want. Covering the mortgage, rent, groceries, healthcare, a little travel, helping out the grandkids once in a while. Just a normal, comfortable retirement. Not extravagant, just comfortable. Social Security provides half, $4,000. A pension provides another $1,500. And let's say guaranteed income, the kind we've been talking about all this show, provides another $1,500 on top of that. Add those up, $4,000 plus $15 plus $1,500, that's $7,000 a month covered before the investment portfolio is even asked to do anything. Now, look closely at what just happened in that picture. Of the $8,000 needed every single month, $7,000 of it now is covered, guaranteed, contractually obligated to show up, completely unaffected by what the market did yesterday, last week, or last year. The investment portfolio, the part that's exposed to the market, only has to produce the final $1,000. That changes everything about how that portfolio can be managed. When your portfolio only needs to be covering $1,000 of an $8,000 monthly need, you can afford to let that portfolio be invested the way portfolios are meant to be invested, with real growth potential, able to ride out volatility, able to compound over years and decades, because your actual lifestyle was never depending on it day to day in the first place. Notice what that guaranteed income did here. It didn't replace the investments. It didn't compete with them. It freed them up to finally do their real job, grow, without also being asked to moonlight as your monthly paycheck. Those are two different jobs. And for the first time, every dollar is only being asked to do the one job it's actually suited for. So how does insured money address this final point? How does what I do address this? One more piece worth understanding. While you're not yet taking income, the money inside these contracts typically grows tax deferred, meaning you're not paying taxes on the growth each year along the way you might in a taxable brokerage account. That deferral lets the income base build more efficiently over time, which means a larger guaranteed income figure by the time you're ready to turn it on. So the sequence often looks like this. Money goes in, grows tax deferred for a number of years while the income base builds, and then converts into that $1,500 a month guaranteed piece in our prior example, all from a single contract with no separate moving parts to manage. The accumulation phase and the income phase aren't two different products. They're two phases of the same one coordinated plan. When we come back, our final segment, I want to address that one objection I hear more than any other, but what about the stock market over 30 years question? And then I want to bring the whole case together point by point so you can see exactly how it all fits. But before I do, let me offer you this. All right, if you'd like more information, if you'd like to speak with me about your insured money or getting insured money, then here's where that can start. I've got a guide I'll send you. It's the Case for Insured Money. It solves problems investments cannot solve. If you take out your smartphone, go to your texting app, key in the following number, 84503, then all I want you to do is text SAFE, S-A-F-E, SAFE. Text SAFE to 84503. Everybody that does will get the Case for Insured Money. It solves problems investments cannot solve. And you'll get an opportunity to speak with me if you've got a portfolio that you'd like to make sure has these types of benefits associated. Or if you'd like to have a retirement experience that sounds much more pleasant because you know aspects of it are guaranteed, then all you got to do is text SAFE, S-A-F-E, to 84503. We can talk about income. We can talk about guarantees. We even have products that have an incentive bonus to them. We can talk about tax deferral. We can talk about lifetime income. Whatever it is that you'd like to discuss, all of that simply begins by taking out your smartphone, going to your texting app, keying in that 84503 number. Let us know you're out there in Radio Land. Let us know that what I'm saying has some appeal to you. Okay? I think it's reasonable to have some percentage of your portfolio that is guaranteed. Text SAFE to 84503. All right, jumping back in. This is it, the final segment of our very first show together on Insured Money. This is the Greybeard Show Insured Money Edition. And I want to start this one a little differently because I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. I've made this case to enough people in enough living rooms over enough years to know exactly what's coming next. So let me address it head on instead of pretending nobody's thinking about it. Here's the pushback, and it's a fair one. I get it all the time, honestly. It's the smartest objection anybody can raise. And if you're thinking it, that tells me you've been paying attention all hour. Shawn, or Greybeard, I hear ya. But over 30 years, stocks will probably outperform insured income. Isn't that the whole point? And here's my answer. I agree with you. That's probably true. And it's also not the right question. Let me explain what I mean, because this is important. The question isn't which asset has the highest expected return over 30 years. If that were the only question that mattered, if maximizing a single number on a spreadsheet 30 years from now were the entire goal of retirement, then every retirement portfolio in America would be 100% stocks. Full stop. No annuities, no bonds, no insured income, nothing. Just stocks all the way down. But that's not how anyone actually plans, and it's not how anyone actually lives, because it's missing something essential. The real question, the one that actually determines whether someone has a good retirement, not just a mathematically optimal one on paper, is this. What combination of assets gives a retiree the highest probability of achieving their goals while letting them actually sleep at night for the entire 30 years, not just at the end of it? Those are profoundly different questions. The first is about maximizing a number on a spreadsheet at one single point in time, 30 years from now. The second is about a real person living real years, all 30 of them, who needs both the math to eventually work and the ability to actually enjoy the years while it's working. A plan that technically wins on a spreadsheet at year 30, but causes someone to white knuckle every single market downturn for those 30 years, missing trips, avoiding decisions, lying awake at night, hasn't actually won anything that matters to the person living it. They won an argument. They didn't win at retirement. So let's bring this whole case together. 6 points. Let me walk through them one more time, because I think when you hear them back to back, like this, stacked up, one after another, the whole picture clicks into place in a way that's different than hearing them spread out over an hour with commercial breaks in between. Point one. Retirement is a distribution problem, not an accumulation problem. And most advisors are trained as growth specialists, not income architects. Point two, the market is an incredible machine, but it promises absolutely nothing to you. Not your principal, not your income, not your timing, not your longevity. Point three, the order your returns happen in the market can matter more than the average itself. Sequence risk. The risk of having to take money every year is real, and it can turn two identical average returns into two completely different retirement experiences. Point four. The biggest risk in your portfolio might be the person looking back at you in the mirror. Fear and euphoria cause real people to abandon good plans at exactly wrong moments. Point five, nobody knows the one number that matters most, how long you're going to live. And insurance is the only tool that can actually solve for an unknown date by pooling that risk across thousands of lives. And point six, it's not about how much you have. It's about how much shows up. Income, not net worth, is what retirees actually live on. And a relatively small amount of guaranteed income can free up the rest of your portfolio to finally do its real job, growth. Here's the thread that ties all six of these together, and I want you to really hear this part. The purpose of insured money was never to replace investing. The purpose of insured money is to insure the risks that investing, by its very nature, cannot eliminate. Running out of money, bad timing, living too long, emotional decision making, a market crash landing at exactly the wrong moment. Those 5 things are not solved by picking better stocks or a better fund or a smarter advisor. They're solved by structure, by a different tool doing a different job. The strongest retirement plans I've seen in 30 years are almost never 100% invested and almost never 100% insured. They use investments to create wealth, and then they use insured money to create certainty. And the certainty piece is what allows the wealth piece to actually do its job without panic, without forced selling, without betting your lifestyle on what the calendar happens to say the downturn day hits. That's not the case. Not that insured money is the best performing asset you can own. It isn't. And anyone who tells you otherwise isn't being straight with you. The case is that it solves problems. Your investments were never built to solve. And once you see that distinction clearly, it's very hard to unsee it. So here's where we go from here. If anything you heard in this hour made you think, I've never had anyone explain it to me that way, that reaction is exactly why this show exists. And it's exactly the conversation that I'd love to have with you one-on-one about your specific situation. No pressure, no obligation. Just a clear, honest look at where your plan stands on each of these 6 points and where there might be gaps you didn't know were there. You can head on over to getinsuredmoney.com. Set up a time, give us a call. You can also connect by texting SAFE, S-A-F-E, to 84503. 84503. If you text that 4-letter word, SAFE, because after 30 years of being in the business, after 22 years as a financial advisor, I got out. I didn't want to deal with risk anymore. I didn't want to deal with disappointment. I didn't want to have to look good people in the face and tell them bad news. What I do now guarantees I won't have those types of conversations. You can text SAFE to 84503. Now, before I let you go, also, by the way, if you want to connect, you can find me. You can find my podcast at thegreybeardshow.com. You can go to thegreybeardshow.com. That's my website. My socials, most of them, the ones that matter, The Greybeard Show, you guessed it. Follow me there. You can direct message me, connect there, ask me questions, whatever you want. But if you want to get in touch about insured money, text SAFE, S-A-F-E, to 84503. I want to give you a reason to set a reminder for next week because we're going to build directly on everything we talked about today. Next week's show. Today, the whole case was about certainty, making sure income shows up no matter what the market does. Next week, we're tackling a different question, but one that fits together with today's case like 2 pieces of the same puzzle. What if the income that shows up, what if that guaranteed income could show up completely tax-free? You're not going to want to miss that. All that and more coming back next week on The Greybeard Show Insured Money Edition. This is The Greybeard Show.
The Greybeard Show. Learn,
Build.
grow.